Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're evaluating the 2024 season of second baseman Bryson Stott. And a down year for the kid. How does he bounce back? Well, we'll break it all down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume in podcast form. Subscribe to the YouTube. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. And all that is the best way to say that you enjoy the content. And it really helps me out here to continue to put out good content for you guys. So appreciate everyone who's done that and is going to do that. If you don't know me from Locked On Phillies, maybe you know me from some of my other work. I've been doing sports talk radio in this city for 5 years, 97.5 The Fanatic, talking Philly sports. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years, and this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So go ahead and check out our friends over at Game Time. Let's break down Phillies second baseman Bryson Stott's 2024 season today. This is going to be a bit of a more disappointing one than what we saw in our evaluations of JT Realmuto and Bryce Harper in our most recent episode. Yet, Stott did not have a good 2024. He just flat out didn't. He wasn't productive enough at the plate. This is a guy that in the past we've talked about as a potential batting king in the National League. And this year he batted .245 with 11 home runs. Now, the power at second base is never really a necessity. So the 11 home runs, I'm not really too worried about. But batting .245 is not acceptable for a player like Bryson Stott. Now, remember, this is only his third year at the major league level. So he's still settling in. He's still a very young player when it comes to his major league career. He's only 27 years old. He'll be 27 next year. He just turned 27 on the 6th of October. So you're looking at a guy that still has plenty of room to develop and will continue to become a great hitter. He's very close with Bryce Harper, we talked about in our last episode, and that's a good guy to have in your corner. So do I believe in Bryson Stott still? Sure, I do. I'm not saying, oh, well, this guy, he's not an answer for it. We'll talk about the long-term stuff coming up a little bit later on the episode. And we're also going to talk about his ceiling as a hitter. But evaluating his 2024 season, it wasn't good enough. He didn't put together good enough at-bats. He struggled mightily to the point where we had conversations about Edmundo Sosa being a platoon guy with him. After the 2023 season, the thought was, well, this dude's a Gold Glove defender who's going to hit like 280 to 300 in his career, and he just puts together such great at-bats and sees the ball so well, and he has a great approach at the plate, and he was kind of that guy. You know what? It's funny. People talk about the approach so much with this Philadelphia Phillies team and getting more guys that just put the ball in play and move runners over and take what the pitcher gives them rather than being some of the power hitters. Bryson Stott's supposed to be the prime example of that guy. And maybe that's part of the reason that they had trouble this year to create consistent offensive points, because Bryson Stott simply, he wasn't that good at the dish. He wasn't. And that's reality for the 2024 season for him. He only had 19 doubles. He had 32 in 2023. 11 home runs to 15 in 2023. 57 RBI. So he still created some runs. He only had 62 in 2023. So that's pretty good. Stolen bases is like, he's low-key a great base stealer. He had 32 stolen bases in 2024. The guy can run. He is an athlete. He only struck out 93 times. And he had 506 at-bats. He struck out 100 times and 585 at-bats in 2023. So you say, okay, that's not terrible with the strikeout numbers. You'd like to see a little bit more of the power, not so much in the home run way, but doubles. I need more than 20 doubles from Bryson Stott. He can be that type of a hitter, and you need that type of production from a player who's going to be in your lineup every day. But he was available. He fielded well. He did the little things well. What the biggest question for Bryson Stott is going to be is those splits, the lefty-righty splits. And we know that his batting average in general was not good. .245 is not exactly what you're looking for from a guy who's supposed to be a contact hitter. But when you look at the splits, lefty-righty, I mean, that's just a situation where it's got to get better. He batted .251 against right-handed pitchers. He batted .223 against lefties. And you might say, wow, that sounds like your batting average should be a little bit lower. How does that even out to 245? Well, he saw righties significantly more. He barely faced lefties. He only had 129 plate appearances against lefties as opposed to 442 plate appearances against righties. The organization has told you what they think about Bryson Stott right now. They're nervous about him against left-handed pitchers. They don't think he's capable of hitting them consistently enough, which is why he does not get nearly as many opportunities. We told you he had 11 home runs. 10 of those came off righties. We told you he had 19 doubles. 16 of those came off righties. We said the RBIs, 57 RBIs, 47 of those against righties. I mean, he hits righties significantly better, but you need to have more guys on this team that are less split dependent. And that's why Edmundo Sosa was in the conversation so much. Now, Edmundo Sosa was very much used as the replacement for Trey Turner when Turner had that long hamstring injury. We'll talk about that when we evaluate Trey Turner and also when we evaluated Edmundo Sosa. But it never really worked out to have him in a platoon. And what I will say is something I preached all year with Bryson Stott was belief in the player, right? Stick with the guy because your ceiling is higher with Bryson Stott out there, not just because of the defender that he is. And we saw the leather flashed a couple times in that series against the Mets, but he also had that big RBI triple in, what was it, game 2? Yeah, like he was really, really big for them in that spot. And he had the grand slam against the Marlins last year in the wild card series, and then was really quiet in the postseason after that. But the guy can have big moments. And for a young player, you like to see them have memorable moments in the postseason to make you believe that, okay, this is a guy worth having faith in. And credit to the Phillies. They could have sapped his confidence. They could have gone to Edmundo Sosa at second base later on in the season. They could have sat him down for a week or tried to change a bunch of stuff about the way he was approaching at the plate. But Rob Thompson and this organization said, yo, we're going to let you fight through this. We did the same thing with Nick Castellanos in right field. Now, that's a more proven veteran player with an all-star nod. But, like, that is what this organization kind of stands for, what Rob Thompson stands for, is believing in your guys. And with Bryson Stott, I believe it paid off. He had an okay series against the New York Mets. It wasn't great, but it was okay. And he made some great defensive plays, like I already said. So that's kind of what he is at this point. But it was a disappointing season. Like, I'm looking at the positives because he's a young player, but in reality, he wasn't good enough in 2024 to be the everyday second baseman of this team. He's going to need to be better in 2025. I'm going to need to see him hit above 265, preferably above 270. I'm going to need to see continued Gold Glove defense. I'd like to see the strikeout numbers down. I'd like to see a little bit more gap-to-gap ability for Bryson Stott when it comes to adding to those doubles. Like, he's got wheels. He should be that guy, but he just wasn't this year. And it was not the sophomore slump, but I guess the junior slump for Bryson Stott in his third season, because his second year was outstanding. So did we set the bar too high with what he did in 2023? I really don't think so. I find it hard to believe that was setting the bar too high for the player. Maybe he's not going to be and remember in 2023, he batted 280, 15 homers, 32 doubles. Maybe he's not that player next year. Maybe it'll take him a couple of years to become that guy consistently. But listen, whatever the bar was set at for Bryson Stott, I've got to give him a lower than average grade because I think he had a disappointing season in 2024. And I think he'd tell you that himself if he was asked about what he did at the plate. Now, real quick, before we give the grade, Gold Glove caliber defense again. He is a Gold Glove nominee at second base for the second straight season. 2 of his first 3 years at the major league level, he's been a nominee for the Gold Glove award at second base. Like, that tells you all you need to know about the guy as a defender. That's why he's going to continue to play on this team. But offensively, it was a major, major drawback this year to the point where we stopped talking about Bryson Stott's defense. I'm going to give him a D+ for the 2024 season. I don't think it's fair to give him a D or a D- and start getting into those like close to failing grades. I don't think it was a failure of a season for Bryson Stott. But I look at it and I say, under expectations. It was not good enough for what you need this guy to be. And that's disappointing. It's disheartening for a player that you had a lot of faith in going forward. Now, as far as second baseman across baseball, I'm going to give Bryson Stott a C. Dead average. I think he was an average second baseman in the major leagues this year. The defense adds, the offense subtracts, it evens out to an even grade. And That shows you where he set the bar for himself in 2023. He's supposed to be an above average second baseman. This year he wasn't. I think he was just like a league average type of guy. And you can have those guys on your team. The problem is you're going to have some of those guys in the outfield unless changes happen this offseason. So can you afford another one in the infield, especially from a guy that you believe that can be better than that? I would prefer to see, and everybody would, but like I think it's realistic to prefer to see a much better Bryson Stott in 2025. And that's the goal. That's where the bar is being set. If this team is going to be a great team like they want to be and be a World Series contender again like they want to be and not get bounced from the postseason early, he's one of the guys that really is going to have to pick it up. And I think you see a significantly improved 2025 from Bryson Stott. We'll get into that later on in the offseason when we start talking about like storylines. I'm calling one of the storylines now. Bryson Stott is going to be much better in 2025. And I think we're going to hear about that once the team gets back and gets into spring training. Coming up next, we're going to discuss his ceiling as a hitter. How much has it changed from potential National League hits leader to or average leader to, well, can this guy be a batting champ? Can he hit over 270? We'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode. But first, let's talk about FanDuel, because there's a lot of great sports going on right now. And America's number one sportsbook, FanDuel, they have everything you need for the football season, NFL. Basketball is getting going. Philly has their first basketball game tonight. The hockey season has already been rolling. College football is in full swing. You've got the World Series starting tomorrow night. You've got a lot of stuff going on that you might want to bet on. And you have a lot of stuff that you might want to say, well, I need to see a second or two of this game before I decide what I want to bet. Well, that's perfect, because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets with FanDuel. They've got all the information you need. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. They are America's number one sportsbook. So what is Bryson Stott's ceiling as a hitter? It's a difficult question to answer at this point in time because we've seen some good, we've seen some bad. We've seen some great approaches at the plate. We've seen some bad approaches at the plate. I mean, we haven't really seen him become the peak of what he can be, I don't think. I don't think that he's maxed out his potential. He had 53 walks this year. He had 39 all of last season. So he's still creating great opportunities at the plate. He just wasn't getting the results. And I do think part of it, right? He was unlucky at points. When you're in a slump and you're a solid hitter, like I believe Bryson Stott is, part of that is just, man, and you probably get tired of hearing me say this, but it's baseball. Sometimes you get unlucky. Sometimes you go through stretches where if you're not hitting the ball square, okay, you're not going to have great chances to get a hit. But then when that starts happening, it feels like the odd chance you square up a ball, it's right at somebody, or someone makes an amazing play. Like, it felt like there was some unluckiness to Bryson Stott, and there's still stuff to be plenty excited about when it comes to his approach. But how excited should we be? It's hard not to be like a homer sometimes when you're rooting for this team the way that we all do. We're all Philadelphia Phillies fans, right? Or if you're a Phillies fan, if you're not watching this, I'm a Phillies fan. So it's hard for me sometimes to not be a homer with some of these things like projections. Not what I'm seeing, but what I think is going to happen, because I always root for the best for the team that I want to win. But what I think for Bryson Stott, like, we may have been a bit hasty to say he's going to be a National League batting champ one day. Luis Ariz is unbelievable. I mean, Trey Turner was closer to doing that. Trey Turner, I think, top 5 in the National League in batting average this season. So Bryson Stott wasn't even the guy on the Phillies that was closest, and that's fine. Like, I'm not comparing Bryson Stott to Trey Turner. I can't. They're totally different points in their career. We'll do Trey Turner next episode, by the way, so you're going to want to check in on that. That will be a very interesting evaluation. But do I think Bryson Stott could be a 300 hitter at the major league level over the course of a season at some point in his career? I'm going to right now say it's more likely not going to happen. Like, that's just my vibe about it because of the lefty-righty splits. Normally you see guys that hit to that level, they can hit pitchers from both sides of the plate. And the biggest knock on Bryson Stott his whole career has been the guy doesn't hit lefties well. Now, I say his whole career, it's 3 seasons. It's a small sample size. There's a lot to figure out about who this guy's going to be as a baseball player long term. So, again, these are projections. Don't kill me if I'm wrong on this in the year 2028 when Bryson Stott bats 308 or something. Like, he can still continue to develop, but my gut feeling is that his ceiling is probably like a 280 to 295 hitter. He's going to be one of those guys, and that's because of the splits, unless he figures out how to hit lefties, and it's something he's going to have to work on. We talked about the different things with JT Realmuto that has to change as far as how many innings he plays, Bryce Harper, as far as taking care of himself, and there's only so much you can change because he's such an aggressive player. Bryson Stott's number one offseason thing that he needs to work on in order to reach his ceiling as a hitter or get closer to it is just work on hitting lefties. Figure out a way to get it done because that is his Achilles heel. It's his kryptonite right now. But even that, if you have a Gold Glove caliber defensive second baseman who's going to go up there and hit somewhere between 280 and 295, that's good enough, folks. That's a great professional hitter in this day and age. It's not a Hall of Famer. It's not a perennial all-star, but he's a guy that every team in baseball would want to have on their side if he becomes that type of hitter. That's where I see his ceiling as. And we'll allow for 5 points of variance, right? Could he be a 275 guy? Sure. Could he be a 300 guy? I don't think it's crazy if you're saying Bryson Stott could still be a 300 hitter for a season in his career. I don't think that's insane. But right now, with what I've seen so far, my guess is that it's less likely that it happens than what I would have thought last year. So I don't know. I'm not trying to kill the kid for one bad season in his third year up. He's 27. Like, not that 27's young, but in baseball, that's young. He's got a while. People don't really hit their prime until, if you're coming up when Bryson Stott did, 29, 30 is probably where you're going to see the best version of Bryson Stott. So you might even have another year before he gets there. The hope is he gets there at 28, and you have a great second baseman next year. We'll talk about his future as a long-term option for the Phillies coming up in the final segment. Let's talk about some of the other numbers besides batting average, because batting average, while it is a great indicator for a guy like Stott, who is a average hitter, not average as in average compared to his peers, like he hits for average is going to be the way that he plays this game long term, I believe. Let's talk about some of the other numbers when it comes to pop, though, because what we saw from him in 2023 with the doubles over 30, I think he could be I know he could be like an over 30 doubles guy. Like, I know that can be his. He had a down year this year. He almost got to 20. I don't see any reason why he can't be over 30 doubles next year. So that's good. Triples, he's had 2 each of his first 3 seasons at the major league level. That's fine. Triples is not like hey, I want to see him have this many, because part of it's luck, especially playing in a ballpark like Citizens Bank Park, where it's not that big. The alleys aren't that big. RBIs, I'd like him to be a 65 plus RBI guy. His career high is 62. That'll come if he's consistently a 30 doubles guy. The biggest thing with Bryson Stott, where the question is home runs. This could be the X factor. 15 home runs in his second year in the majors would seem to indicate, hey, this guy could show some pop one day. But is it going to be 15, 15, 14, 16, 15 type of pop, or could he get to 20? I believe that 20 home runs is probably right around his ceiling for power. And I don't want him to chase that and give up the type of average hitter he is, because that's what this Philadelphia Phillies offense needs right now. Now, maybe that changes. Maybe there's a point in the future where you don't have Kyle Schwarber anymore, and you don't have JT Realmuto anymore, and you don't have Nick Castellanos anymore. Like, further down the line, a couple seasons from now, and you might say, hey, we need to see 20-plus homers out of Bryson Stott, because we need that type of pop from our middle infield, because we don't get it from the spots that we're used to getting it from. That's certainly possible. But if I had to say, like, the average high-level season at his peak for Bryson Stott, bats 290, 30 doubles, 20 home runs, 65 RBIs. We'll just go with that. That's an all-star caliber player, especially with Gold Glove defense. I do think at some point in his career, Bryson Stott is going to be an all-star player and an all-star hitter to some extent, at least against righties. We'll see once again against lefties. So you hear what I'm saying. Like, the ceiling for this kid is still up there. He's still going to be a plus major league player. I firmly believe that. But how does he get there? And why did he have such a down year? It was just that tough approach against lefties where he can't figure him out, and that's what's going to need to change for him to reach that ceiling. It's pretty simple for Bryson Stott. He doesn't have to change anything about his defense. His base running's been great. He's clearly an intelligent baseball player that puts together good at-bats, but when it comes to winning those at-bats with a hit, he just didn't get it done this year, and that was a disappointment, and that sucks, but the hope is he'll bounce back next season. Now, here's something that gets interesting, though, because he's kind of, the daycare timeline is accelerating quickly. So we'll talk about this with Alec Boehm, and we'll talk about this with Brandon Marsh, but we'll talk first with Bryson Stott. Is he a long-term option for the Philadelphia Phillies? Basically, is Bryson Stott a guy that when his contract comes up in a couple years, when he's first eligible to test free agency, does this guy get paid before that? We'll talk about it coming up as we wrap up today's episode. But let's talk about Game Time first, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, and they got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. I mean, all of that takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. It's not just MLB tickets. The World Series starts tomorrow night, but football, basketball, hockey, college football, all going on right now. It's a beautiful time of the sports calendar. It's one of the few times where you've got the four majors all going at once. So there's a lot of stuff to go to. And also comedy, concerts, theater, all of that stuff that you might need to get away from sports for a day or two. They've got tickets for that too. They have Game Time Picks, which has curation to your needs to make it easier to save more on stuff like sports and concerts and comedy and theater, all that stuff we listed. They have all-in pricing, which means you toggle that feature. It shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, which you don't want to get shocked by the fees at the end. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And if you find a seat in the same row and section for less anywhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They've got everything to make sure your ticket buying experience is as easy as possible. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or any tickets and more with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So is Bryson Stott a long-term option at second base for the Philadelphia Phillies? I think it's a fair question. I really do. Because at some point, the payroll of the Philadelphia Phillies is going to come back down. I don't think it will be a steady increase every single season from now until the rest of forever. I just don't see that as realistic, especially with the luxury tax thresholds and everything and them having paid into it. So there's going to be a decision to be made. Bryce Harper's going to be here making a boatload of money forever. Trey Turner's going to be here making a boatload of money forever. Aaron Nola's going to be here making a boatload of money forever. Zach Wheeler's going to be here making a boatload of money forever. They've got a lot of big name guys making a lot of money. And there's going to be some guys whose contracts fall off. Castellanos, Schwarber, Realmuto over the next couple seasons. Those guys are all probably going to come to their ends of their time here in Philadelphia, or they'll get newer contracts, lesser dollar amount than what they're currently getting paid right now. But let's live in a world where you have to replace those guys. You have to find a 40 home run guy to replace Kyle Schwarber. You have to find an all-star caliber right fielder to replace Nick Castellanos. You have to find a starting catcher to replace JT Realmuto. You know what I'm hearing? Expensive. That's going to cost money. And there are going to be some places where you have to make concessions in the payroll, where you have to decide, I would like to play Alec Boehm, a young starter at third base in the All-Star game who is a near 100 RBI guy for multiple seasons and has really upped his defense and everything like that. I'd like to pay Bryson Stott, who we're talking about now, who could be an all-star caliber second baseman, who plays gold glove caliber defense. That's a big part of this team. I'd like to pay those guys. I'd like to pay someone else in the outfield to round out the rest of our outfield. Maybe you look to pay Brandon Marsh if they keep him and he develops into a professional hitter or a true professional hitter. But you're not going to, I firmly believe, pay all of the daycare. Either Alec Boehm or Brandon Marsh or Bryson Stott or multiple of those guys will not necessarily be here long term. Because in the outfield, you have Justin Crawford, who's going to come up in the next couple of years. At third base, you have Aiden Miller, who's going to come up in the next couple of years. But the interesting thing is, there doesn't seem to be that heir apparent at second base for Bryson Stott. In fact, there's more people calling for Bryson Stott to be the shortstop of this team and take over for Trey Turner and move Trey Turner to second base because of Turner's rough defense the past couple of years, than there are saying, well, I don't want Stott to be on this team. So is Stott a long-term option for the Phillies? I believe of the daycare members, him, Bohm, Marsh, those are the three guys we're talking about. I think he is most likely of those three to be with this team long-term. I think he's a guy that is just one of those glue guys on a roster that could be a plus player at any given time, but could also just be a guy that you don't have to pay an inordinate amount of money where you say, okay, this is another $100 million contract. Like, I don't know that he'll be one of those guys, but he could be close to it, absolutely. And he would be worth that if you're cutting salary other places. He just seems to be not the safest option, right? He seems to be the most logical option for the Philadelphia Phillies to look at a long-term future out of those guys. And when I say long-term, I'm not talking about 2025. I'm talking about 2028, 9, 2030. Years that don't even feel like they exist right now as we sit here in the year 2024, but will be here before you know it. That's what I'm thinking about when it comes to Bryson Stott's future with this team, is just like, could you replace Alec Bohm? Yes. Hayden Miller. Could you replace Brandon Marsh? Yes. Justin Crawford. Could you replace Bryson Stott? There's not as clear of an option there in-house for cheaper. So he's kind of got himself a nice little niche carved out here with the Philadelphia Phillies when it comes to defensive infielder. Now, Bryce Harper is a Gold Glove candidate, a Gold Glove nominee at first base. But the other positions, first base is kind of its own thing. The other infield positions where you truly look at them as like standalone infielders, not that first basemen aren't infielders, but you know what I mean. It's a kind of that half catcher, half infielder position over there. Second base, shortstop, third base, where you see guys rotate between. Bryson Stott is your best defensive player at those positions. He is clearly the best defensive player, I think, in the infield in general. He may be, well, no, Yohan Rojas still exists. So he's probably the second best defensive player on this roster right now. And that also helps him out with his long-term viability. You need plus defenders on a team that's going to hit for power, because it's rare to find a power hitter that's also a plus defender. Aaron Judge doesn't grow on trees, folks. So, yeah. Does Bryson Stott, is he a long-term option for the Philadelphia Phillies? I would say absolutely. He's projectable. What he does is something that should carry for a large part of his career, because he doesn't rely on his body all that much to create power or anything like that. It's more approach at the plate. And we're talking about a 27-year-old and his longevity. It sounds crazy because he's only been in the majors, I should say, for a cup of coffee. But some people wonder, when you have this tough of an end to a season, where do the changes come? There will not be a change at second base. And I don't believe there will be for a long time, unless there's a flop between him going to shortstop and Trey Turner going to second. But they've already said, the organization, that's not happening this year. I wouldn't expect it to. Trey Turner's still the shortstop of this team. That's a conversation when we get into Trey Turner's evaluation, which will be our episode for tomorrow. And I'm sure you guys are going to love that one, because he is a lightning rod of criticism and sometimes praise since he came to the Philadelphia Phillies. So that's more about him, number 7. But number 5 over there at second base, yeah, you should feel pretty darn good about him being the second baseman of this team. I know he had a down year. I already told you, this is not me just being blind to the issues that Bryson Stott had this year. I've already evaluated him as a D+ for the season. But when you see what tools he has and how he could potentially grow into that, I think he's a pretty safe bet to be with this team long-term. So if you have a Bryson Stott jersey, yeah, I think you picked a good one. I think you can wear that one for a while. And maybe he becomes a guy where he's one of the core of this team. I don't necessarily see Bryson Stott as a core member of the Phillies right now. That's Castellanos, Ramuto, Harper, Schwarber. Am I missing anyone? Turner. Yeah. That's the core of this team right now when it comes to position players. And then he's part of that secondary group, the daycare. But in a couple years, it's going to be time for him to be one of the core members of this team as those other guys move on. And my guess is that he's going to be ready for the moment at that time. A blip on the radar in what I think will be a successful Phillies career for the young second baseman. And that's why I have a lot of faith in him as a long-term option for the Philadelphia Phillies. There's plenty of reasons to still believe in Bryson Stott. Just a rough year. And that happens to young players from time to time. So our first below average evaluation for the 2024 2024 season right there. Actually, did I give JT a C minus? I might have given him a C plus. Whatever the case may be, that's the first one where it was like, oh, this guy had a bad year. We may have another one of those coming up when we talk about Trey Turner. Or is it another Bryce Harper situation where we actually underrated his 2024 season? Well, that'll be a conversation for tomorrow, but that's all for today's episode. So thank you so much once again for joining us on Locked On Phillies. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. And I will talk to you tomorrow on our next episode.